I spent my whole life breaking my back at the shipyard, welding steel in winter winds so cold they cracked your skin, coming home each night with salt in my hair and rust in my lungs, thinking every sacrifice I made was for family. I worked 6 days a week for 50 years, skipped vacations, ignored the pain in my knees, and buried every dream I ever had so my daughter could go to college, wear pretty clothes, and live the life her mother and I never could. When Margaret died 3 years ago, I thought maybe Emily would finally understand the cost of love, that she'd reach back toward me the way a child once clings to a parent. But instead I became the shadow in her doorway, the old man she tolerated out of obligation. And last night, in the silence of our house, I heard her voice cut through me sharper than any blade, telling her husband Greg that I made her sick, that my presence gave her the creeps, that she couldn't stand living under the same roof as me anymore. 50 years of labor, of devotion, of building her entire world, and in a single sentence, she reduced me to a burden she couldn't wait to throw away. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments where you're watching from. I stood there in the dark hallway, my hand pressed against the wood of the doorframe to steady myself, my heart pounding so loud I thought it would echo down the stairs. For a moment, I wondered if maybe I'd misheard, if maybe she was joking, if maybe the tired mind of an old man had twisted her words into something crueler than she'd meant. But no, the contempt was clear. Her voice wasn't frustrated or careless. It dripped with disgust, every syllable a reminder that in her eyes I had gone from father to parasite. Greg said nothing. That's what burned worst of all. He just let her spit her venom, let her cut into me without lifting a finger to stop her. And when he finally spoke, his words were worse than silence. Maybe he'll get the hint, he muttered, like I was some stray dog that wouldn't leave their porch. I turned back into my room, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the framed photo of Margaret on the dresser. She'd been gone 3 years, but her eyes still looked alive in that picture, the same way they had when she'd tell me, "Henry, don't ever let anyone mistake your silence for weakness." I whispered her name into the empty room and felt the walls close in. They think I'm weak. That's their mistake. Because what Emily and Greg don't know, what nobody knows, is that 2 months ago I sold the last piece of land my family had kept hidden for generations. 25 acres of coastal pines up in northern Maine, land my grandfather carved out with his own hands, land my father swore me to keep safe until the right moment. I kept it secret, paying the tiny taxes every year, never breathing a word to Margaret or Emily. And when a developer came calling this spring, waiving contracts and offering $2,100,000, I signed the papers without hesitation. That money is sitting in an account right now. My account. Untouched. Quiet. Invisible. And last night, while they were laughing about how disgusting I am, I decided exactly how I'm going to use it. Not to buy their love back. Not to earn a seat at their table. But to show them what real consequences look like when you spit in the face of the man who gave you everything. I didn't sleep. Not because of my arthritis, not because of the ache in my hip. No, I lay awake planning, every detail sliding into place like steel beams in the shipyard. Planning a lesson, planning a reckoning. See, I'm done being the quiet old man in the corner. By the time this story is finished, you'll understand why Emily and Greg will never forget the day they mistook my patience for weakness. Morning came gray and damp, the kind of coastal morning where fog curls around the trees and salt clings to your throat. I brewed my coffee slow, letting the bitterness steady me. Emily moved around the kitchen with forced cheer, the kind that's supposed to pass for politeness but fools no one. Greg sat at the table scrolling his phone, his tie half knotted, his smirk faint. "Sleep well, Dad?" Emily asked without looking at me. "Like a stone," I said, though my eyes were red from a sleepless night. She didn't press. She never pressed. She just wanted the exchange done so she could move on. I studied them both as I stirred sugar into my coffee. They had no idea that I'd been handed the kind of power most people dream about. They thought they were in control, that I was too old, too slow, too grateful for scraps of their attention. And maybe that's the best disguise I've ever worn. By mid-morning, they were both gone. The house creaked in the silence, the fog lifting outside to reveal the dull shine of wet pavement. I sat at the kitchen table with a yellow notebook, the kind I used to keep at the shipyard for logging hours, and I began to write. Every insult, every slight, every cold smile, every dismissive shrug, every time Emily let the phone go to voicemail when her mother was dying. I wrote it all, page after page, not for pity, but for evidence. Because men like Greg don't slip on their own. They need a push, and I planned on giving him one. That afternoon, I made my first move. When Emily came home, I asked her casually if she'd be willing to help me review some papers I was putting together. Her eyes flicked toward Greg, then back to me. Papers? She asked carefully. Estate planning, I said, as though the words tasted unfamiliar. I don't want to leave a mess behind when I'm gone. Thought maybe you and Greg could give me some advice. Her whole face lit up, like a switch had been thrown. Of course, Dad. That's smart. We'd be happy to help, right, honey? Greg didn't look up from his phone, but his smirk widened. Sure, Henry. Happy to take a look. That was all the confirmation I needed. Over the next few days, I set the bait deeper. I left envelopes half tucked out of drawers, with fake bank statements showing balances just shy of $2 million. I accidentally left a folder open on the dining table with the words property sale agreement stamped in bold across the top. Each time, I watched their eyes linger a little longer, their hands twitch toward the pages before pulling back. One evening, Greg finally bit. He slid the folder closer while he thought I wasn't looking. His eyes scanned fast, greedy, his lips moving silently as he read the numbers. Something interesting? I asked from the doorway. He jolted, coughed, forced a laugh. Just curious, Henry. Didn't know you still had property up north. Not much worth mentioning. I lied smoothly. Old land, old woods. Guess it wasn't as worthless as I thought. He smiled too wide. Well, good for you. You deserve a little comfort. But his eyes gave him away. He was already calculating. Emily followed soon after. She cornered me in the kitchen one night, her voice dripping honey. Dad, I was thinking, maybe you shouldn't stress so much about handling all this alone. Greg works with investments all the time. He could make sure your money's safe. I leaned against the counter, meeting her eyes. Safe from what? She hesitated, searching for the right angle. You know, scams. Bad decisions. People taking advantage. I let a slow smile creep across my face. Funny. That's exactly what I was worried about. Her expression faltered for just a second. Then she laughed, too loud, and changed the subject. That night, in the silence of my room, I added more notes to my yellow pad. I wasn't just documenting anymore. I was building a case, brick by brick, word by word. But a plan without proof is just suspicion. I needed more. So I bought a small digital recorder. Nothing fancy, just something I could tuck under a couch cushion or inside a coat pocket. And the very next evening, while Emily and Greg sat in the living room sipping wine, I slid it into place and let it drink in their words. What I heard later made my stomach turn, even though I'd been expecting it. Greg, he's sitting on a gold mine. You saw the numbers. Emily, I know, but he's stubborn. He'll never hand it over unless we make him think it's his idea. Greg, then we keep pushing. Keep being nice. Everyone cracks eventually. I played those lines back a dozen times, the hiss of the recorder filling the empty room. Each replay hardened me further. They thought I'd break. But the truth is, I've never been stronger. The fog had rolled back in by morning, the damp air seeping through the cracks of the old house. I sat with my coffee, notebook open, recorder in my pocket, and a calmness I hadn't felt in years settling over me. They'd made their intentions clear. Now it was my turn. I looked at Margaret's photo on the dresser and whispered, "It starts today." By the third week, the act was running smooth. Emily fluttered around me with fake sweetness. Greg dropped little comments about smart investing, and I played my role as the tired old man, grateful for their sudden attention. They didn't know I had their voices trapped inside a tiny recorder. They didn't know every fake smile only pushed me further. On a damp Tuesday evening, I sat in the living room with a stack of envelopes spread out on the coffee table. I'd spent the afternoon at the library printing off decoys, fabricated bank statements, mock legal forms, things with numbers big enough to make Greg's mouth water. When Emily walked in, she stopped cold, eyes narrowing at the paper. "Dad, what's all this?" I looked up like I'd been caught with something embarrassing. Just trying to make sense of it all. Too many numbers for an old man like me. Greg slid in behind her, his tie loose from work, his eyes immediately locking onto the bold figures at the top of a statement. He tried to act casual, but I saw the hunger twitch across his face. "You know, Henry," he said, dropping onto the couch. This could get overwhelming. You don't want to mismanage things at this stage in life. I leaned back, feigning weariness. Maybe you're right. Maybe I need help. Emily's hand shot to my arm. Gentle, rehearsed. That's all we've been saying, Dad. We just want what's best for you. The words almost made me laugh. Best for me? No, best for them. That night, after they went to bed, I slipped the recorder into my pocket and walked down to the diner. I knew the owner, knew he wouldn't mind me sitting in the corner with a slice of pie and my thoughts. I listened to the playback, the way Greg's voice sharpened when he saw the statements, the way Emily leaned into her role. And then I heard what came after I left the room. Emily, he's close, Greg. He's starting to trust us. Greg, good. Once he signs, we'll move fast. Before he changes his mind. Emily, do you think he suspects anything? Greg, he's 71. He barely keeps his pills straight. We'll have him wrapped around our finger before he even realizes what's happening. I set my fork down hard enough to rattle the plate. The waitress glanced over, but I waved her off. My pie sat untouched. They weren't just planning. They were mocking me. By the time I walked home through the salt air, the decision was clear. It was time to hit back. The first strike came subtle. The next morning, I asked Greg if he'd take a look at a potential investment I'd been considering. His eyes lit up, and he smoothed his tie like a salesman ready to pounce. Of course, Henry. That's what I do. I slid a folder across the table. Inside was a fake real estate prospectus I'd pulled together, complete with photos, charts, projected returns. The numbers looked dazzling but deliberately flawed, full of red flags obvious to anyone who wasn't blinded by greed. Greg flipped through it, nodding along, his tone full of fake expertise. Yeah, this looks solid. High yield, low risk. You'd be smart to move on this quickly. Emily chimed in from the stove, her voice sweet as syrup. See, Dad? Greg really knows his stuff. You can trust him. I hid my smile behind a sip of coffee. They were walking straight into the trap. That evening, I added the exchange to my notes, word for word. And then I made a call to Sheriff Lawson, an old fishing buddy who still owed me a favor. I didn't give him details, just told him to be ready when I needed a witness. Henry, he said, his voice low. If Greg's messing with you, I'll be there. Just say the word. The second strike came quicker. On Thursday, I left my checkbook on the counter by mistake. When I came back from a walk, I found Emily flipping through it, her face tight. She looked up too fast when she heard me. Oh, Dad, I was just making sure you hadn't misplaced this. I stared at her for a long second, long enough for her to squirm. Thanks, I said flatly, sliding it from her hand. That night, the recorder caught their fight. Emily, he's not as clueless as you think. Greg, doesn't matter. Money makes people stupid. Just keep pushing. I sat in the dark, the little red light blinking, and felt something settle in me like stone. They weren't family anymore. They were predators circling meat. So I started planning my third strike, the one that wouldn't just expose them, but leave them no way out. I spread my fake documents across the table, drew arrows in my notebook, circled dates. The plan had to be perfect, airtight, because the moment I let them step 1 inch closer, they'd show their true hand. And when they did, I'd have them. By the time Friday rolled around, the air in the house felt heavier, like the damp fog had seeped into the walls. Emily hovered more than usual, offering me tea, asking about my day, smiling with too many teeth. Greg strutted like he owned the place, jacket slung over a chair, his voice louder than it needed to be. I let them circle me. That evening, over dinner, Greg leaned back in his chair and dropped his first real push. Henry, I've been thinking. You've done well for yourself, but if you want to make sure Emily's taken care of, you need to lock things down. Set up a trust, maybe move some of that money into safer investments. I kept my fork moving slow, chewing on a piece of chicken like his words were just background noise. A trust, huh? He smiled, slick and confident. Exactly. I could draw something up this weekend. No pressure, of course, but you don't want to leave loose ends. Emily's voice chimed in right on cue. Dad, Greg's right. It's not about control, it's about peace of mind. For all of us. I set my fork down and looked at them both. Peace of mind. That's what you call it. Emily blinked, her smile faltering. What do you mean? I let the silence drag long enough for her to squirm. Then I smiled faintly. You're right. Maybe it is time to put things in writing. Greg nearly choked on his wine, trying to hide his excitement. He thought the hook was set. The next day, I made sure of it. I left a manila envelope on the dining room table, labeled estate planning documents. Inside were carefully crafted fakes, a will that left everything to Emily, lists of assets, even instructions for Greg to serve as trustee. I left the house early, giving them the whole morning alone with it. When I returned, the envelope had been moved. Not far, just enough to know someone had peeked. That night, the recorder under the couch picked up their whispers. Emily, it's working. He's coming around. Greg, once he signs, we'll move it fast. Maybe into that resort project. He won't even know until it's done. Emily, do you think he suspects? Greg, he's an old man, Em. He's not playing with a full deck anymore. I sat in my room listening to their voices hiss through the tiny speaker, and I laughed. A low, bitter laugh that shook my chest. They thought I wasn't playing with a full deck. They were right. I was playing with a stacked one. On Sunday, I tested them again. Over breakfast, I sighed, like the weight of the world was pressing on me. Maybe you're right, I said slowly. Maybe I can't manage this alone. Maybe it's time I let you two handle things. Greg's eyes flicked to Emily's, a silent exchange of triumph. That's the smart move, Henry. We can help you set everything up. Make sure it's safe. Emily reached across the table, squeezing my hand. You won't regret it, Dad. But regret was the last thing on my mind. That afternoon, I drove into town and stopped at Sheriff Lawson's office. I handed him the recorder, a fresh notebook, and the fake will. You're walking them right into it, he said, his brow furrowed as he scanned the papers. That's the idea, I replied. He looked at me long and hard. Henry, you know once this starts, there's no going back. You ready for that? I thought of Margaret. I thought of all those nights holding her hand while Emily never bothered to show up. I thought of the words that still burned in my ears. He gives me the creeps. Yes, I said. I've been ready since the night I heard her say I discussed her. That evening, I staged the final piece. I placed a blank document on my desk, slipped a pen beside it, and left it out in plain view. At the top, in big letters, I wrote, Final Will and Testament. Then I waited. It didn't take long. Greg came in after dinner, casual as ever, but his eyes went straight to the desk. He picked up the pen, twirled it in his fingers. You know, Henry, he said smoothly. If you wanted, I could help draft the language. Something official. Courts like things neat. I looked up from my chair, my voice flat. And neat is what you like, isn't it, Greg? Everything tidy and in your pocket. He laughed, but it was thin. Just trying to help. I let the moment hang, then nodded. Tomorrow. We'll do it tomorrow. His grin spread wide. He thought the game was his. But tomorrow, the real trap would spring. The next morning the house smelled of burnt toast. Emily was fluttering around the kitchen, setting plates, pouring orange juice like it was some kind of celebration. Greg sat at the table in his press suit, a leather folder in front of him, the kind of folder men carry when they're ready to close a deal. I came down slow, came tapping against the hardwood. My knees hurt more than usual, but my mind was sharp as a blade. Morning, Dad, Emily said, too bright, too rehearsed. We thought maybe after breakfast we could sit down together. Go over some things. Things, I repeated, lowering myself into the chair. Like my funeral? Her laugh cracked, but she recovered quick. Oh, Dad, don't say things like that. Greg leaned forward, folding his hands on the folder. Henry, it's about being responsible. You want Emily to be secure. You don't want the state taking chunks of your estate in taxes. I've drafted a simple will and trust arrangement. All you need to do is sign. He slid the folder toward me. The paper inside was crisp, the ink still smelling fresh. I looked down and saw my name, my signature line already marked with an X. Quick and painless, Greg said, his smile just a little too wide. 10 minutes, and you'll never have to worry again. I tapped the folder with one finger. Funny thing, you two never wanted to talk finances before. Now it's all you seem to care about. Emily shifted in her chair. Because we care about you, Dad. We just want to make sure you're taken care of. I let the silence stretch. I watched her eyes flicker toward the paper, then to Greg, then back to me. Greg cleared his throat. Why don't we make this simple? You sign, I'll file it, and Emily can rest easy knowing your affairs are in order. I leaned back in my chair, folded my hands over my stomach, and gave them a long, tired look. And what happens if I don't sign? Emily's voice sharpened just enough to betray her. Dad, don't make this difficult. Difficult. That word rang like a hammer on steel. For 50 years, I'd carried steel beams heavier than cars, worked 12-hour shifts until my back screamed, held Margaret's hand through cancer, and buried her alone. And now my own daughter was calling me difficult because I wouldn't hand her my life's work. I picked up the pen. Their eyes lit up. They leaned forward like gamblers watching dice roll. I scratched the pen across the paper, not on the line, but in the corner. One word, no. Greg's face darkened, his mask slipping. Henry, don't play games. This is serious. I pushed the folder back toward him. So am I. Emily's voice cracked. Dad, please. We're only trying to protect you. Protect me. I barked, my voice louder than I intended. From what? From myself? Or from the chance I might spend my money on something other than your pockets? The silence that followed was thick. Greg's jaw worked, his hand tightening on the folder. Emily's eyes filled with tears, not the kind born from love, but frustration, the kind a child spills when a toy is taken away. I stood, cane pressing hard into the floor. I need air. I left them at the table, their scheme crumbling around them. But I wasn't done, not even close, because the recorder hidden under the fruit bowl had caught every word, every threat disguised as concern, every push, every slip of their greedy tongues. That night, I sat in my room listening to the playback. Over and over, I heard Emily's sharp, "Don't make this difficult." I heard Greg's hiss, "Don't play games." And I knew it was time for the next strike. The following day, I paid a visit to my lawyer, an old friend named Robert Keene. He'd helped me draft real documents months ago, the ones that secured my accounts, tied everything up tight. When I walked into his office, Robert looked up from his desk, eyebrows raised. "You look like a man with a storm at his back." I placed the recorder on his desk, pressed play. For 5 minutes, the office filled with Emily's fake sweetness and Greg's slick threats. When it ended, Robert leaned back, whistling low. "Jesus, Henry, that's your own daughter." "Not anymore," I said flatly. "Now she's just evidence." He nodded slowly. "You want to take this to the sheriff?" "Not yet," I said. "First, I want them to see what they threw away." Robert's eyes narrowed. "You're planning something." "I'm finishing something," I corrected. That evening, when I returned home, Emily greeted me at the door with forced warmth. "Dad, we were worried. You were gone all day?" "I had business," I said, brushing past her. She hesitated, then asked, "Important business?" I looked her dead in the eye. "The most important." Her smile faltered. Upstairs, I placed a new envelope on my nightstand, thick with papers. But this one wasn't a decoy. These were the real documents, my will, my donations, my plans. And soon, Emily and Greg would learn the difference between wanting everything and ending up with nothing, because the trap was nearly ready to close. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments where you're watching from. The following week, the house felt different. Not quieter, not calmer, just tenser, like a wire pulled too tight, ready to snap. Emily hovered more than usual, watching me like I might suddenly crumble into dust. Greg, on the other hand, grew bolder. He'd leave financial magazines on the counter, accidentally bring up stories of elderly men swindled out of their estates, slide comments into dinner like, "It's better when family steps in before strangers get involved." I let him talk. I let them both talk. Every word was another nail in the coffin of the life they thought they were building. On Tuesday evening, I made my move. We were sitting in the living room, the news murmuring from the TV, when I cleared my throat. "I saw Robert Keene this week." Emily's head snapped toward me. Greg's smile twitched. "Robert? The lawyer?" she asked. "That's right," I said, keeping my voice calm. "We had some important things to discuss." Greg leaned forward, his tone smooth but tight. "Like what, Henry?" I let the pause drag just long enough. "Like my will." Emily's face lit up, too fast, too eager. "Oh, Dad, that's wonderful. Finally. Did you make arrangements?" I nodded slowly. "I did." Greg's hand tapped against his knee. "And what did Robert suggest?" I looked at them both, my face stone. "He suggested I make sure the people I leave behind deserve it." The silence in the room grew heavy. Emily's smile froze. Greg cleared his throat, reaching for a safe line. "Well, of course. That's just smart." I leaned forward, my voice dropping low. "You know what else is smart? Recording conversations." Greg's eyes flickered. Emily blinked, her mouth parting, then shutting tight. I didn't press further. I just stood, cane tapping, and walked out of the room. I could feel their eyes on my back, the weight of unease settling over them. That was the first strike. The second came Thursday. I left a letter on the kitchen counter, folded neatly, with "To whom it may concern" written on the front. Inside was nothing but a single line. When greed speaks louder than love, family dies. When I returned from my walk, the letter was gone. Neither Emily nor Greg said a word about it, but the tension doubled. Emily's hands shook when she poured coffee. Greg's voice grew clipped, his confidence fraying at the edges. That night, I heard them arguing through the thin walls. Emily, he knows, Greg. I saw it in his eyes. Greg, then he's bluffing. Old men bluff when they're scared. Emily, what if he really talked to Robert? What if, Greg, then we push harder. If he thinks he can outsmart us, we'll show him otherwise. Their arrogance burned like acid in my veins. They still thought they had the upper hand. So on Saturday, I pulled the rug out. I invited them to the dining room. The table was set simply, no dinner, just 3 envelopes in front of me. Sit, I said. They obeyed, exchanging quick glances. I slid the first envelope toward Emily. This one's for you. She opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a photocopy of a scholarship fund agreement, the Margaret Wallace Scholarship for Orphans and Foster Youth. The amount pledged, $750,000. Her mouth dropped. Dad, what is this? Money, I said evenly. Going to children who never had parents who cared. Children who'll do something with the chances they're given. I turned to Greg, sliding the second envelope his way. He opened it, jaw tightening. Inside was a letter from my lawyer, confirming a $200,000 donation to the local church for renovations and a food program. Greg slammed the paper down. This is insane. Do you have any idea how reckless this is? Reckless, I repeated softly. That's what you call giving food to families who sleep in cars. He said nothing. His eyes were hard, but I saw the panic beneath them. I placed the third envelope in the center of the table, my voice low and steady. And this one is for both of you. Neither moved. Finally, Emily reached for it, unfolding the paper with slow, hesitant fingers. Her eyes scanned the words, and the color drained from her face. It was a letter, written in my hand. Emily and Greg, you will receive nothing. You had love and squandered it. You had trust and poisoned it. You wanted my money more than you wanted me. And now you'll live with the knowledge that your greed built homes for strangers, fed hungry families, and educated children who never once called me Dad. Emily's tears fell hot, streaking her cheeks. Dad, no. You don't mean this. Greg slammed his fist on the table. Henry, you're making a damn fool of yourself. These so-called charities will eat you alive. They'll waste it. At least if you left it in the family. Family. I cut in, my voice sharp as a blade. Family doesn't call their father disgusting. Family doesn't plot behind his back. Family doesn't circle like vultures waiting for the old man to drop. The room went dead quiet. Emily reached across the table, desperate. Dad, please. We can fix this. We can. I pulled the recorder from my pocket, set it on the table, and pressed play. Her voice filled the room, dripping with venom. He makes me sick. I can't stand having him here. Greg's face drained of blood. Emily covered her mouth with both hands. I stopped the recording and leaned on my cane. That's who you are? Not family. Not children. Just liars who thought an old man couldn't hear. I left them there, staring at their own words echoing back at them. Upstairs, I sat in the silence of my room, Margaret's photo catching the lamplight. For the first time in months, my chest felt light. The trap was closing, and soon, it would snap shut for good. The house was no longer a home. It was a battlefield with quiet weapons, stairs, silence, and slammed doors. Emily avoided me for 2 days after the envelopes. She walked with red-rimmed eyes, muttering clipped answers whenever I spoke. Greg, on the other hand, grew darker. His politeness peeled away like old paint. He looked at me the way a man looks at a wall standing between him and a payday. On the third evening, I found him waiting in the living room. No smile this time. No folder of fake documents. Just him, leaning forward, elbows on his knees, eyes sharp. Henry, he said, voice low, we need to talk. I leaned against my cane, steady. Then talk. He glanced toward the stairs where Emily had retreated earlier. She can't take much more of this. You're killing her. That almost made me laugh. Me killing her? After all the years I kept food on her plate, After all the nights I sat by her mother's bedside alone while she was too busy? No, I didn't laugh. I just stared. What exactly is it you want from me, Greg? His jaw tightened. I want you to stop playing games. You've got $2 million sitting in accounts. You're old. You're sick. And you're wasting it. There it was. The mask gone. I lowered myself into the chair across from him. You think you're entitled to it? He didn't flinch. I think Emily is. After everything she's given up, after everything she's done. Everything she's done? My voice cut like steel. She abandoned her mother on her deathbed. She called me disgusting in my own house. That's what you call everything she's done? His nostrils flared, but he pushed on. Fine. You hate me. That's clear. But Emily's your daughter. You really going to leave her with nothing? I leaned closer, my cane pressing into the carpet. She left herself with nothing. His eyes hardened. The air grew heavy. For a long moment, we sat in silence, the only sound the ticking of the old clock on the wall. Then he spoke, softer, darker. You know, accidents happen, Henry. Old men slip. They fall. Sometimes they don't get back up. My heart slammed against my ribs, but my face didn't move. Is that a threat, Greg? He leaned back, spreading his arms across the couch like a king on his throne. It's reality. You don't want to end up in some nursing home drooling on yourself. Better to let family handle things before it comes to that. I smiled then. A cold, sharp smile. Thank you. He frowned. For what? For giving me exactly what I needed on record. His face paled. He looked toward the fruit bowl, toward the little recorder he'd forgotten I liked to keep nearby. His eyes flicked back to me, panic rising. You son of a... The door creaked open upstairs. Emily's voice floated down. Greg? What's going on? He shot me one last glare, then stood, smoothing his shirt, pasting on a fake smile. Nothing, honey. Just chatting with your dad. But the damage was done. That night, I copied the file from the recorder onto 2 flash drives. One went into my safe deposit box at the bank. The other, I slid into an envelope addressed to Sheriff Lawson. Insurance. By Friday, Emily cracked. She came into my room while I was reading, her face pale, her eyes swollen. She sat on the edge of the bed like a child. Dad? She whispered, please, don't do this. Don't shut me out. I made mistakes. I said things I shouldn't have. But you're still my father. For a moment, the old part of me, the part that remembered her little arms wrapping around my legs when she was 5, the way she'd run to the door shouting Daddy's home, wanted to believe her. I wanted to think maybe some piece of that little girl was still in there. But then I remembered her voice on the recorder. He makes me sick. I can't stand having him here. I set my book aside and looked her dead in the eye. You already made your choice, Emily. You chose greed. You chose lies. And you chose him. Her tears spilled, rolling down her cheeks. I didn't know how to fix things. You don't fix family by selling it to the highest bidder, I said coldly. She sobbed, buried her face in her hands, then fled the room. That was the last attempt at softness. 2 nights later, I woke to the sound of footsteps outside my door. Slow, deliberate. I reached for my cane, holding it tight. The door handle turned, then stopped. A shadow moved under the crack. Then silence. I sat there in the dark until dawn, every muscle tight. They were desperate now. Desperate people make mistakes. The next morning, I called Sheriff Lawson. Tomorrow night, I told him. Be at the house. Bring a deputy. It's time. He didn't ask questions. He just said, I'll be there. That evening, I walked into the kitchen where Emily and Greg sat drinking wine. I placed a folder on the table, thick with papers. What's that? Greg asked, his voice cautious. My final decision, I said. Tomorrow, you'll know everything. And I walked out, leaving them to stew in their own greed. Upstairs, I sat by Margaret's photo, the lamplight warm against her smile. Tomorrow, love, I whispered. Tomorrow it ends. The next evening the house was quiet, almost too quiet. Emily and Greg sat in the dining room, glasses of wine in front of them, tension thick in the air. They thought tonight was the night they'd finally corner me, finally get the signature they'd been clawing after. But tonight wasn't for them. Tonight was for the truth. I carried the folder in under my arm, cane tapping against the floor. Sheriff Lawson and a deputy waited in an unmarked car across the street, their presence unknown to the vultures at my table. Greg looked up, eyes sharp, hungry. So, you've made your decision. Yes, I said simply. I set the folder down between us and Saturday, it's all here. Emily leaned forward, trying for warmth. Dad, whatever it is, I just want you to know. I love you. I studied her for a long moment. No, Emily. You love what I can give you. There's a difference. Her smile cracked, but she said nothing. Greg flipped open the folder like a wolf sniffing blood. His eyes scanned the first page and froze. It wasn't a will. It wasn't a trust. It was a signed affidavit from my lawyer, confirming that every dollar had already been allocated. $750,000 to the Margaret Wallace Scholarship Fund, $200,000 to the church and food program, $100,000 spread across local charities, and the remainder locked in accounts untouchable by anyone but me. Greg's face reddened. What the hell is this? I leaned on my cane, voice steady. It's the sound of the door slamming shut on your scheme. Emily snatched the papers, her eyes darting over the words, her lips trembling. Dad, no, this can't be right. Oh, it's right, I said. I made sure of it months ago. Before you ever called me disgusting. Before you ever whispered to your husband's mother about how exhausting it was to pretend to love me. Her head snapped up, tears spilling. You heard that. I pulled the small recorder from my pocket, pressed play. Her voice filled the room. He makes me sick. I can't stand having him here. She covered her face with her hands, sobbing. Greg slammed the folder shut, his voice rising. You're insane, old man. Giving it all away to strangers? Do you know how much good we could have done with that money? Good. My laugh was sharp, bitter. You mean the kind of good that involves you buying a new boat while calling me senile behind my back? His fists clenched. You'll regret this. I leaned in close, my eyes locked on his. No, Greg. You will. Because that's when Sheriff Lawson stepped through the door, the deputy behind him. Greg's face drained of color. Evening, Lawson said calmly, holding up a small recorder of his own. I heard everything. Greg stammered. You can't just. Threatening an old man for his assets. Lawson's tone was flat. That's elder abuse, fraud, coercion. We'll let the DA sort out the rest. Emily gasped, clutching the table. Dad, please don't do this. I stood, cane steady, voice cold as the ocean wind outside. You already did this, Emily. Every word, every scheme, every tear you faked. You thought you were bleeding me dry. But the only thing you drained was your chance at family. Lawson nodded at his deputy. Take them. The deputy stepped forward. Greg cursed, shoving his chair back, but it was over before it began. Emily sobbed, clinging to him as they were led out the door, their protests echoing down the quiet street. The house fell silent again, but it was a different kind of silence. Not heavy, not suffocating, just empty. I walked back to the dining table, gathered the folder, and slid it under my arm. On the way upstairs, I paused by Margaret's photo. Her smile caught the lamplight, soft and warm. It's done, I whispered. They won't touch a cent. That night, I slept deeper than I had in years. 2 weeks later, I packed a single suitcase and left Bayfield behind. The ocean air that once smelled like home now only reeked of betrayal. I rented a small apartment down in Clearwater, Florida, 1 bedroom, 1 balcony, and the sound of waves rolling in every morning. Simple, peaceful, mine. Every month, I get letters from the scholarship kids. Maria, who wants to be a nurse. James, who taught himself computers and now has his first real job. They write about hope, about gratitude, about futures they never thought they'd have. That's where my money went. Not into Greg's schemes, not into Emily's pockets, but into hands that would build something real. Sometimes, when the sun sets over the Gulf and the sky burns orange, I sit on my balcony and think of Margaret. We raised a daughter who forgot what love meant. But maybe, just maybe, her betrayal gave me the chance to spread love further than I ever could have imagined. I take a sip of coffee, the night air cool on my face, and let the silence settle. No anger, no regret, just truth. And one final thought, sharp and clear as the tide rolling in. Some treasures aren't meant to be inherited. Some are meant to be earned.